Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sedona International Film Festival. I'm your host, Carol Kahn. We are celebrating our 31st anniversary here at the festival, and we are so excited to bring you filmmakers from around the world. We'd also like to thank our sponsors, Mercedes-Benz, BMO Bank, Linda Goldenstein Gallery, the Kling Family Foundation, and all the hoteliers, restaurateurs, and volunteers who year after year volunteer and give us their time and rooms and restaurants and great food, all of that every single time. And we're so appreciative of you for doing that. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Susanne and Shari Bellafonte from a film and documentary that Susanne has done as a tribute to Shari's father, Harry Bellafonte. So welcome to Sedona.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
It's great to have you here. And as we were talking, this is your first time that you've been in Sedona.
It is, and I'm coming back. I might never leave.
That's what happens. It gets in your blood.
It sure does.
Right, and Shari, you said that you mentioned that you've been here before.
I was here many moons ago, and you know, all the national parks are always so special, but when you see them in the daylight, we were talking about the fact because Susanne came in last night late after the dark, which she couldn't see as you're driving up the canyon up to our hotel because we're at Enchantment, and when you wake up in the next morning and you pull your drapes back and suddenly you're going, oh my God, we've got the American Alps are sitting right outside my window.
Unbelievable.
All the parks are so fabulous, but Sedona is so pretty.
There's something very special here. I know. I was visiting for 6 years, and I never thought that I would move here because it was just so magical that every time I would come here, something would happen. And I'm like, I can't move here because of that.
It's too much magic.
Right. And someone said to me, what if the magic was enhanced? And I was like, oh, I never even thought about that. And I will tell you, it was enhanced.
I believe that.
It's beautiful.
But it is my first time to the Sedona Film Festival, so I'm excited to be here. I'm so happy that Susanne is here, too.
Yes.
So she can tell everybody about the movie that she worked on for so many years.
Yes. I'm on
My agent.
Yes, and we also will show the trailer in just a second of the film. But tonight is the showing of the film at 7 p.m. at the Sedona Performing Arts Center. So if you have not gotten your tickets, make sure that you get your tickets to this film, and there'll be a Q&A after with both of you. So that's going to be exciting. So we're looking forward to that as well. So do you want to set the stage a little bit before we show the trailer of your part in the film and just talk about it briefly?
Sure. Well, in 2011, I finished my first film about Harry called Sing Your Song. And at the end, he was wondering, what do we do now? That's the last thing he says. And so that's something that just stuck in my mind, and I thought I really would like to answer that. And Harry, at that same time, asked me to join him in a new office. So we began to see each other absolutely every day. Plus, he lived 4 blocks away from me. I had breakfast with him 2 or 3 times a week before going into the office. So we were in each other's sphere all the time. And he would wonder, what am I going to do with the last chapter of my life? And then in 2012, Trayvon Martin was murdered. And that really is where the story begins. And so I just started filming him from 2012 until the end of his life, really. Just how he engaged with many young people and celebrities, and trying to figure out how to make sure that we have a just and compassionate world and bring that into the future.
Great.
And so that's really what the film is about.
Okay, let's take a look at the trailer, and then we'll talk some more.
All my life, I've been involved in the movement, touring and doing concerts.
Mr. Bellafonte wanted to be a bridge to the unfinished work of his time.
I'm here because you called. Oh, see, can you see? This is about America. I've embarked on this path to change. through other personalities, through other people.
He did something to me that night that changed my life forever.
Artists are the gatekeepers of truth.
Mr. Bellafonte said, myself, Al, Jesse, Martin, we marched. I said, hold on. We talk about these people like it's a boy band.
It's not really that the civil rights movement ever ended.
I really wanted him to guide me through this process since he was part of the original March on Washington.
This is the revolution. History is rising up to put itself at our disposal to say, don't be pushing this thing towards conflict. We should be pushing it towards resolve.
Mr. B has called upon so many of us to use our voices.
To speak out. It takes a lot of courage. So all I can do is leave behind the crumbs of my experience. I have a trail that you can follow. If you find value in it, pick it up. And if you don't, do something better.
Wow. You know, watching the trailer to this, I got goosebumps all through my body because your father loved America. It just seemed that he really like spoke about it and wanted change to happen. And I will never forget, you know, the song, I think it was We Are the World, that he, you know, brought that out and wanted all these artists to perform and to sing, and he wanted unity. What's your, like, what's some of your feedback and stuff? I know, you know, this film happened, and, you know, growing up, I know a little bit about that, but talk to me about your feelings.
Harry was in love with the world, not just the United States, but certainly had an affinity with it here, and felt from the beginning that his focus was on activism and equality and making sure that civil rights had a platform that would always maintain the fight for equal rights for everybody, women, people of color, Native Americans. He had a huge platform, and that was it. He wasn't the family guy, you know. He truly was very focused on making the world a better place. And his music, oddly, took a back end to that. I think he used his music more as a platform for him to be able to bring this message, to be able to get that message across to the world. And as the years grew on, as he got older, I remember having the conversation with him lately, you know, more recently, going, do you think it's better now than it was before? And he said, no, but we got to keep fighting.
Right.
So to see Susanne go through not only the first movie, which is Sing Your Song, which I think embraces a lot more of his music, you know, people will see more about what the music was and how he became this activist. This one really is the button on the last 10 years of his life, on how very still dedicated and very focused he was on trying to get that message across. And like Susanne was saying, Trayvon just triggered something in him and there was a young little girl, there was a black girl, I think she was 7 or 8 years old,
Jaisha
who,
Scott.
who was put in handcuffs because she was acting up in class. And that just put him into a whole nother stratosphere in terms of saying, my fight's not over yet. I gotta keep pushing. And Susanne, I think, brings it out beautifully in both these movies.
Yeah, so I saw an interview just recently, and of course doing the research for this particular film, and it was of your brother and your niece and your nephew. I think what impressed me about that particular interview, I want to say it was like, I think on ABC or whatever, but it was basically carrying on a legacy. And so I think it's important that people recognize the legacy that your dad was part of. You know, there's still people that talk about it, but how do you feel about continuing, like, whether it's civil rights or, like you said, your dad said that it wasn't a continuation, or it needs to be more.
Well,
how
actually,
do you feel about
my
that?
older sister Adrienne has a foundation called the Anir Foundation, where she deals with bringing people to Africa, people from the United States. They build habitats for humanity. My younger sister Gina actually is carrying on. Harry started an organization called The Gathering, which Gina was a part of in the beginning. But then they sprang off and did another one called Sankofa. And Sankofa, really, again, Gina has a daughter, Maria. They're working very hard. My sister has children. They're working very hard. I'm the only one who doesn't have children, and I'm all here for the dogs. I'm a best friend's animal, like, I'm the animal advocate in the family. But, all of our parents, my mother was Harry's first wife, and she was one of the creators of the Head Start program, and was very focused on making sure that her children, my older sister and myself, had a focus on bettering the world. We found it in different avenues and different factions, but Gina really is the one that I think is carrying on the real name for Harry, because she's got the organization that's in his. But all of his grandchildren, my niece, is teaching. My older niece, who's in Denver, all of us have that feeling that we have to bring something better to the plate than what it was when we first arrived.
Right.
I'm going to just add something to that, because the foundation that Gina is head of, Sankofa, really follows Harry's belief that artists are the gatekeepers of truth. They are civilization's radical voice. And so Sankofa and so much of Harry's work in his last years was centered on getting artists to use their power, the power of art, and to use their platform, especially through celebrity, to activate people. And as you can see, we're at a point in history where this is needed more than ever.
Yes.
And so he was so prescient, and in following Harry, it warns you so much about what's going to happen, and here we are.
Right. I mean, which is, it's like really hard to believe. I mean, I mentioned to you that I've lived in North Carolina. I moved there like in 1980. It was very strange moving from New York City to North Carolina and still experiencing things that like happened in the Civil War. And this was in 1980. And so it's sort of like a flashback for me. It's like hard to believe like that it still exists, and we we think we're making 3 steps ahead and we're making 3 steps back. So it's very frustrating, for us too, who want change and want that equality, and it doesn't matter what your color of your skin is, or if you're a woman, or we just want that equality, and we don't have it. So for me, it's like I admire people that, that are activists, and because you don't see that often anymore. If you're an activist and you speak very loudly, you don't last very long, and so it's really disheartening. So to have the courage to put forth a documentary or to put someone's voice out there or whatever it is, it takes perseverance, it takes courage, it takes all of those things, right, to get that message out there.
It takes timing.
Yes, exactly.
Because there are things that are happening now. Of course, we have an administration that is really kind of pulling us back into a dark age. The real reality is people have to stay focused and understand and not become, what's the word I'm looking for? Complacent. That we really do have to stand up for our rights, and that, it's not like it was. Harry said, as I said just a couple of years ago before he passed away, he said, no, it's worse now than it was, because we've opened Pandora's box and we've given allowance to people being able to be as racist as they want to be as uncaring as they want to be, just not supportive of humankind.
Right.
This is a country that my mother was Native American and black and white. She was, like I said, she was Harry's first wife. So, not the daughter, the wife, the daughter, the wife, no. And there was that moment of joking when I was in my 20s that, 1/3 of my family owned 1/3 of my family and annihilated the other third of my family. But, when you look at Turtle Island, which is the United States, and you have all these people now that are being so down on immigrants, and, you want to, as the Native American part of me, want to say, wait a second, how do you think you got here? Because really, this was all Native American territory before, before you came from Ireland, before you came from Russia, before you came from Spain. And, it's a mindset that we have to, I think the Democratic Party has to understand that they can't be the wealthy liberals that are dictating what we really need to have, and the Republican Party really needs to come back to what their ideals were as well, and be here for humankind. And movies like this, Susanne got it in, I think, under the wire, because I don't know how many of these you're going to be able to get to see past this next administration, during this administration.
Right.
you have to just keep on fighting.
You do have to keep
Yes,
fighting.
and doing the things that you're doing.
Yeah.
So tell me, you spend a lot of time with Harry.
That was great.
Yeah, that was. I know. I didn't want to go off track because I wanted to ask you, like, what your mom, like, being Native American, like, what she taught you, because living here in Sedona and in Arizona, you know, and learning, really actually learning about the Native American life and culture and what they honor and what's sacred and all of that. So was any of that kind of transposed to
She
you?
was. It's very interesting because she was part of a lifestyle that Native Americans were even more subservient than blacks. And at the time, her father was in the class that took the Native American away from them. You know, they were not allowed to speak the language. They were not allowed to have any connection to their Native American background. So we as children never really knew about what our Native American background was. However, my mom came back around and she ended up being on the White House Commission for Native American Affairs and the White House Commission for Aging and Youth. And like I said, Head Start was a program she worked on. So she did still come out to the tribes and come out to, I remember when I was just a child, she would come out to Arizona and to New Mexico, and she was setting up the Head Start programs. So she was very conscious of it, but still never dwelled in it. We did not come up knowing what our Native American background was. It wasn't until just probably about 20 years ago that I started dabbling in it myself, going, no, wait, you know, wait, what are we? Because I knew my grandfather was black and Cherokee, but her mother was Haudenosaunee and white. But the white part, we didn't, you know, never talked about it, and the Native American part, and they actually kind of lumped her in with the black people. So we sort of, like I said, as children grew up thinking we were black. And then later, as you start doing the DNA and going, wait, I'm 50% Irish, Scottish, English. How did that slip in here? But you know, it all depends on what time in the universe that we're in and how to proceed. She was a lot more conservative in her thoughts and how to address certain things, whereas Harry was right up front, right out there. And they're very similar and yet very, very different in their thought process. It's funny because I'm just going back a little bit when you talked about We Are the World. I was at the dinner table when Harry and Ken Cragen, Harry was pitching the idea. He had called Ken on the phone, but they were, let's meet for dinner. I'm coming into LA, so I'm sitting there. It was like a ping pong match. Harry was sitting here and Ken was here, and Harry starts explaining, I want to do this big music thing. I want to bring in all the celebrities. And he says, Shari, write this down. And gets a napkin and, you know, the pencil, and I'm writing it down. He goes, Barbra Streisand. I'm like, Barbra Streisand? Madonna. I'm like, okay, good luck with that, Harry. And I'm writing down the list of people, but then Ken is chiming in, he's going, you know, not Madonna, maybe Cyndi Lauper, and all this. And after I'm writing this list of all these celebrities going, this is never going to happen, but okay. And then right after that, let's go over to Lionel's house, and Lionel was playing a song. He goes, what do you think? And then the whole time I was sitting there going, oh my God, you know, we're wasting our time, but okay, you know, dream on. And then he said, let's get Q on the phone. Of course, Q is Quincy Jones. And, you know, I sort of went, okay, well, yeah, we'll see. And of course, you know, We Are the World came. Not only is it the biggest thing that ever hit the market in terms of trying to send in African relief, but there were so many things that propelled afterwards that are similar, you know, ventures that have happened. And these are the kind of things that Harry always focused on and always wanted to, you know, make sure that everybody understood that they have a part to play in making the world a better place.
Yeah, that's amazing.
You'll
Okay.
actually see that in action in Following Harry, because the Women's March was created in our office. And most people don't know that. And you see Harry getting on the phone and said, you know, get me Tony Bennett. And he goes, hello, Tony? You know, I need Lady Gaga's number. You know, and it just, you know, he starts collecting and adding, and it's just amazing, you know, to the very end.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
He was a dreamer to the very end. When this is not in the film, but my last time with Harry, when he called me up, he said, come over, I just feel like seeing you. And when I got there, he said, I'm so tired, you know, I'm going to have to sleep. Do you mind? But just hold my hand while I sleep. And And, you know, it was so poignant, and I held his hand, and he's sleeping, and he's dreaming, and he's dreaming, and he's dreaming, and all of a sudden his eyes are still closed, and he's going, Supreme Court, Supreme Court. So even
He
to
lived
to
and
the
slept
very
it at the
end,
same
you
time.
know, he was just, you know,
Oh my
what do we
gosh.
do now?
Yeah,
He
it's
was
like,
just,
get
what do we
so-and-so
do
on the
now?
phone.
Yeah. I mean, what was that like for you? You know, it's interesting. I think, you know, you said that you like spent so many days like with him or breakfast or coffee or
Years.
whatever.
Years.
Yeah. And just really getting to know someone for who they really are, right? It's not like this performer or actor or whatever it is, but you really get to see and embody who this person really is.
Well,
What did he teach you?
what he taught me is so, it's so enormous, and some of it is hard to define, you know, because it's just a feeling. But it's really that you have to fight. You cannot give up, and you have to believe in our common humanity. And somewhere deep inside all of us is that good, and it's something that Martin Luther King said to him about Robert Kennedy, you know, which is in my first film. But he, you know, because Robert Kennedy was not, the Kennedys were not supporting the civil rights movement. But King said to Harry, somewhere deep inside there is a good man, and you just have to keep on speaking until you get to that core, to that space. And so that's what he taught me. I thought I knew it, but I understood that it's something you have to really believe in, and not turn your back on people, and keep on trying to get to them, trying to reach across the divide.
And you have told so many stories and documentaries. You're an award-winning producer, and you know, in telling your stories, it seems like this is the most heartfelt story that you're telling or have told.
Well, I'd like to think that all of my films, you know, about Leonard Peltier and about Tiananmen Square, are very heartfelt. But this is the first film I've made in all these decades where I was actually living it, every minute of it as I was making it. You know, I was in Ferguson with all the tear gassing, and I was, you know, in all these spaces that you see in the film. I was actually a witness. And Harry always talks about himself as being a witness to history, and his value now in speaking to all this young people is that he's an elder and a witness to this long arc of history, and the value of that. And so it was such a privilege that I never thought I'd ever had
Right.
in my life, to be in the middle of all of that, and to be trusted to tell the story. And also by all the young people and all the activists who are in the film, that there was a trust there that I had to earn, you know, but I'm thankful for that. And I think that's maybe why you feel, and I loved Harry, you know, Harry was my dear friend, my dear friend, and I just wanted it was so important because I have a 29-year-old daughter, and I care so deeply about her future, as all young people's future. And I just felt it was so important to preserve Harry's words, because there isn't another Harry Belafonte. There's no one that can speak the way he does, that can reach the way he reaches, you know, and just get in your heart and get to you. And I wanted to preserve that for history, because it should be an evergreen. You should be able to visit this film forever and learn from it. That's my hope. And so, yeah.
Well, what also, you know, in watching the film and some of the people that were in there and the actors and all that, it seemed like that they were even given something that they didn't have before.
Yes.
So what message do you feel like was imparted for them? Did they have the strength, really? Do you feel like that it garnered more strength in them to also speak the word that was needed?
Absolutely. I think that this scenes with Jamie Foxx, I think, are such a good example, because you see him sitting and in the NAACP event where Harry speaks about talking about the river of blood that runs through the streets is the blood of our children, our black and brown children. And where are you? Where's the voice? Where's the black voice? Why aren't you speaking up? And you see Jamie Foxx hearing that and actually crying as he's hearing those words. And a few weeks later, he's in our office, you know, where I happen to be, and meeting with Harry, and he just felt compelled. He wanted to do more. He wanted to figure out, what can I do to be a better person? And we found that, I'd come into the office, I never knew who was going to be there, but Prince would come and all these different artists would appear to speak to Harry privately to find out what they can do to be better, to do more. And he just had that ability to make you feel that you owed something back to life. It was your responsibility to give back to life, and you better do it, and you had to answer to him, and you knew that. And so he was powerful in so many ways, but that way, to convince you to look into your own heart and figure out what you had to do. And if you considered it a sacrifice, people lost work. Jesse Williams talks about how his standing up and Harry encouraging him, and then Harry telling him, are you ready for the backlash for what you spoke out about? And then Jesse finds out, yes, he lost jobs. His life was threatened. His children's lives were threatened. So it's a challenge that you have to be, a sacrifice that you have to be willing to take for humanity. Yeah.
And Shari, I know that you became closer to your dad later in life versus earlier in life.
Correct.
So,
My parents separated when my mom was pregnant with me. I'm certainly probably the most visual for most of the society because I've been on television and done shows. So people automatically assume, or ask the question, what was it like growing up with Harry Bellafonte? And people often question, because I always refer to him as Harry. And when I have the time, I usually say, look, that's how I learned who he was. My grandmother and mother would say, well, Harry's coming to pick up the girls this weekend, or Harry's, going away and wants to take them to Africa, or Harry. So I learned that this guy was Harry. The one thing that I really did tap into early on was that he really did have a focus and a vision on what the rest of the world was supposed to be in reference to society. Like I said, civil rights was his first and foremost love. And I never, probably as a kid, there were things that made me go, well, why not me? Or where is he? Why isn't he at my high school graduation? But those are all superficial, considering who he was and what his real goal in life was to be. And I've always appreciated that. And certainly in the last, as I became an adult, I realized that that's what his focus was, that, his family was taken care of, between the music and everything else. We were financially taken care of. I was in boarding schools all my life. I always had a roof over my head and food on my table. So I wasn't suffering, and we also came to learn as years grew on that Father Knows Best and Ozzie and Harriet, they weren't the most ideal families either, even though we watched them on TV in the 50s and the 60s going, why aren't we like that? Why isn't Dad home every night? And then you find out that, well, they're not at home every night either. But once you get rid of the surface ideas of what you think you're supposed to be or how things are supposed to go, and you really delve deep into what we as humankind should be doing, which is loving each other, standing by and supporting everybody and whatever their goals and wishes are supposed to be, provided they don't harm anybody else. You have to forgive and forget that kind of superficial stuff that doesn't really make any difference in the scheme of things. It really is about who are we as a people and how do we make the world a better place to be in. And that was absolutely his dead straight focus from beginning to end. So I learned to appreciate it, and I learned to, support him. And besides, we had jokes. The one thing that we would always, when I would talk to him, because I talked to him a couple of times a week. I live in LA, and of course he was in New York, and I would fly in every year to see him in his birthday. And after a while, it was year after year, and every year you think, all right, this is probably the last. Okay, this is probably the last. And finally, it was like after the 7th or 8th year of flying, I'm like, Harry, this is like a Monty Python movie. When are you gonna go?
Oh no,
I got time. I got things I got to do. But, there was many more years after that, and we always laughed. We always told jokes, and he always was waiting for me to come up with a great joke. So my life in the last few years really became, oh fuck, excuse me, oh man, I gotta find a joke, because Harry's gonna be like waiting for a good joke. So that was my focus, and we really did have a great time in the last, I'd say 10 years. Were really, we were much closer. We were much focused. He gave me my space because I'm a registered independent. So he was, how are you not a Democrat? I said, because I see there's good on both sides. Right. Not so much right now, but that's a whole other thing. But I did work on Capitol Hill. I was working for PBS when I first got out of school. And one of our jobs back in those days, the camera trucks that would end up at up at Capitol Hill, it was one, and you staked the territory, and all the other cameras had to come feed off of you. There weren't a line of trucks from NBC or ABC or CBS or anybody else. And just crawling around on the Capitol floor, like plugging in as the gopher, I would hear, it was like out of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, where the lobbyists were selling their constituents down the river. I'm going, why are we even in this? This is all like just a money grab. And he really dictated to me, he said, no, it's important. Now that you have the ability to vote, it's imperative that you vote and that you get everybody, because your vote makes a difference. You know, it doesn't feel like it in the scheme of things. And there's a whole nother thing that I can talk about that. But nevertheless, you know, it's our right as individuals, especially in this country, to vote. And it's depressing to think that we don't. You know, that only 18% or 20% of the people in this country that have the ability to vote, and then argue and, you know, wonder why it's not turning out the way they want it to be, you know, why they, you know, wait a second, that's not what I planned on. It's like, well, you know, you should have gotten out and voted. So there was a lot of lessons that I think I learned from him that weren't, you know, this is what you need to go out and do. It was watching and learning and growing on my own and being able to have the conversation with him and have the debate with him. And many times he saw it my way. So that was always endearing when he'd finally go, all right, you were right.
Really, he did.
I mean, it wasn't many times, but it was a few times.
He admitted that?
He admitted like, you know, a half a dozen times, maybe in the last 30 years. But, all right, maybe you were right about that.
Well, it just occurs to me in hearing this beautiful speech that the film is like having a conversation, that very conversation that you had with your father. It has that intimacy, and it's that same conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what the film is. It's a conversation that you as a viewer are having with Harry Belafonte,
Right.
which is so critical.
I mean,
But-
people like Colin Kaepernick would come to him, especially in those early
Yeah.
days, you know, going, what do I do? And Harry would
Yeah.
calm him down and say, look, you know, you're standing for something. This is, you
Use it.
did right.
Use it well.
Use it well, yeah.
Well, I think what's amazing is both of you have experienced a part of history. Like, regardless if you thought about it, like, you know, or said, this is what I have, or I walked away with a couple lessons. I'm looking at it as it's much bigger than that, because what I'm hearing you say and the things and the lessons is much greater than maybe, like, you know, that you even acknowledge or feel or whatever, but I'm just looking at it in a completely different way, because I feel like he had a great impact in some way in your life and impact in your life as well. So just to bring, you know, a story like this that people need to listen to, I feel like is of importance. And so you're continuing that. And even by you being here is a message that is that important. So we are so grateful that you're here. So thank you. And thank you for being part of his life and being part of his legacy in so many different ways, and being here with Susanne. And just thank you for the work that you do and that you've brought here to the festival.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for giving us the time.
Yeah, I want to
Absolutely.
thank Patrick for inviting us,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
and hopefully, you know, Suzanne will kick out a few more movies and
Yeah.
we'll come again.
I hope so.
Definitely, definitely. What do you mean you hope so? We're definitely going to be doing that. Okay, so don't forget tonight, 7 p.m., it's a tribute to Harry Belafonte. There'll be a Q&A afterwards with both Susanne and Shari, and we are so grateful to have you both here. So thank you again.
Thank you.
And stay tuned. Even this evening, we'll be coming to you live from the Sedona Performing Arts Center. And then again tomorrow, we will have more interviews with filmmakers, and Tanya Jumore will be back again. So we'll see you later.